Thank you all for joining us. And today's topic is making it through tough times, lessons from fictional heroes. As always, we have these events every Monday, Wednesday, and Saturday, and they're posted on our YouTube channel shortly thereafter. If you are watching this on YouTube and want to join live, there's a link in the description to the London Ayn Rand meetup where you can sign up for these events in advance, and then you'll receive the Zoom link shortly before the event starts. And with us tonight is Nikos Sotirakopoulos, Ayn Rand Center UK academic advisor, and Dr. Andrew Bernstein, philosopher and novelist. His most recent book is Heroes, Legends, Champions, Why Heroism Matters, which you can get on Amazon right now, or if you're in London or in the London area, you can get that at our next live event, which I don't know when that's going to be, but hopefully soon. All right, so without further ado, we'll go to our first speaker, Dr. Bernstein.
Well, thank you, Razi. And by the way, Heroes, Legends, Champions, Why Heroism Matters is nonfiction, although, I have written novels and I'm writing novels. But the topic for today is how we could be inspired during tough times by fictional heroes, correct?
Yes, and by the way, I forgot to say this in my intro, but for the YouTube viewers, I will say that yes, if you have not read Ayn Rand's novels, maybe pause this, give them a quick read, and then come back. It will include many spoilers. So, Dr. Bernstein.
Yeah. You give Atlas Shrugged a quick read in the next 20 minutes. You might be able to you wouldn't be able to get through my Cliff Notes on Ayn Rand's novels in that amount of time. But Razi's a funny guy. But in great literature, and I think Ayn Rand wrote the two greatest novels in world literature, the Fountainhead and Atlas Shrugged, and I'll stand by that judgment till the day I die. But my all-time favorite hero, fiction or nonfiction, is Howard Roark, the hero of the Fountainhead. And I think Ayn Rand said, it's probably in her course on fiction writing, to novelists. She said, make things as tough as you can for your hero. Make things as difficult as you can. And you can see why that's good literary advice, because the essence of good fiction is conflict. There's a hero who pursues a certain goal. There's obstacles that stand in his way, whether they're persons or natural disasters or whatever. And the more difficult the obstacles to be overcome, the more it shows the inner strength of the hero, and the more it shows the human potential. It's more inspiring to the readers, to the audience. And so there's different kinds of conflicts that a hero might be in. You might be dealing with other human beings, like Ellsworth Toohey in The Fountainhead, who's a brilliant villain. I think he's the greatest villain in world literature, to tell you the truth. I'm going to write an essay on that one day. I love Toohey. His scams, he's just a brilliant schemer, to try and stop Roark. The Started Temple scam is just brilliant. And he's a Marxist intellectual. He wants to impose a socialist or communist dictatorship in the United States. He wants to put Roark in prison and break his spirit. He's a formidable villain. Furthermore, the love of Roark's life, Dominique Franken, who loves Roark passionately for various reasons, also stands in his way. So he's got to overcome her fears that a hero like Roark will inevitably be destroyed in a vicious, semi-vicious or corrupt society. So Roark battles against tremendous obstacles over a period of years, and spoiler here, he triumphs fully, right? He wins the battle and gets the girl. And so the more obstacles, and the great thing about fiction, of course, is you could stylize this. In real life, there's all kinds of inadvertent happenstances that that may clutter the landscape and make it more difficult for us to understand the essentials. Like my good friend Eric Daniels, who's got a PhD in American history, likes to say, history is messy. History is not stylized. That really proves there is no God, by the way. There's no omniscient architect here who's giving you the conflict in essential terms. A whole bunch of junk you have to unclutter. But a good writer in fiction will essentialize it, will stylize the conflict, will focus only on the essentials, and then you can really see the hero versus the obstacles and or the villains, and you focus on the conflict. And again, I think it shows the greater the obstacles and or antagonists that the main character overcomes, the more it demonstrates, one, the hero's internal fortitude, and two, the human potential, and consequently is enormously inspiring. So when in tough times like this, when we're all hunkered down in our bunkers, waiting for this virus to burn itself out, you read a great hero story like The Fountainhead, and it's enormously inspiring. It reminds us of what human beings are capable of, and some Howard Roark type in the field of medical research, a Louis Pasteur, a Jonas Salk, or Maurice Hillman, will develop a vaccine and or a cure for this thing. And then we can all come crawling out of our bunkers, even if it reappears in the cold weather in the fall. So, we have the capacity to overcome this thing. And I think a great hero story stylized so to show the hero overcoming formidable obstacles and or antagonists really inspires us, to be aware of how much is possible, how much good is possible humanly.
Nikos.
Right. Yeah. So, by the way, I'm not a speaker; I'm a discussant. But I'll abuse the role and add a couple of notes. So, kind of to provoke Andy and play here the devil's advocate. So, with many of the Randian heroes, probably with the exception of Rergen, we see them in a state which is almost already a moral perfection or something close to a perfection. So someone could say, okay, Andy, I cannot really be inspired, for example, with Fransisco, a hero in Atlas Shrugged, because we see Fransisco from the age of, 8 years old, and he's already brilliant. And there's this, one of my favorite parts in Atlas, where they say about Fransisco, every difficulty is just, or every danger is just an opportunity for him for a great performance or something like that. So someone who is not, let's say, a hero, or we don't know who is a hero and who's not until there's a difficulty, but someone who is not at that level, how did Fransisco become Fransisco, so to speak? Or how did, for example, again, with Roark, we meet him when he's probably 20 years old or something, but how did he get there? So what is the process through which you build that hero? And to give a counter example, which is not that inspiring, but someone could say, look, I'm an average Joe, I can more easily link to that guy. So, Jack London, the novelist, there's a novel called The Sea-Wolf, and what turns to be a hero is a guy, which is what today would call, I don't want to use a derogatory term, anyway, a non-heroic guy, a kind of a soft, delicate guy who, he has zero muscular power, and he finds himself in this boat with this really kind of tough guy and with a really tough motley crew. And the guy slowly toughens up, although he's afraid, he's still a coward. And then this girl appears, and then he slowly stands up to the occasion. So what would you say to someone who say, well, Jack London, who I think, by the way, is a leftist, is better than Rand because he shows us how a hero is built in real time?
You're making me laugh. He's a nerd, by the way. But do you remember his name?
No, but I can find it in a second. I'll put it on the chat because I was reading it 3 months ago.
His name was Humphrey Van Weyden.
Yes, that's weird name. Yeah.
I love The Sea-Wolf. When I taught literature at American Renaissance School, that was one of the books on the 11th grade reading list. It's a great novel. I highly recommend it, by the way. Very philosophical. The way Jack London did a great job integrating a good deal of philosophy into an adventure story. It's well done. But I would say, that heroes come in all shapes and sizes, first of all. You mentioned Hank Rearden, who does develop intellectually and morally through the course of the story. But I think it's possible for a rational hero worshiper to be inspired by all different kinds of heroes. So I agree with you that the story of Humphrey Van Weyden in Jack London's The Sea Wolf, where he develops from this nerdy, he's an intellectual. The good news about him is he's very smart. He's an intellectual. The bad news is, he's physically undeveloped. He's got no social skills. He's cowardly. I don't know. That may be unfair. I mean, I have the same response to Wolf Larsen and these brutes. What was the name of the boat, by the way, Nikos? Do you remember?
I can't remember. But
was it the Ghost? I can't.
The Ghost. Yeah, the Ghost. Yeah.
But there's a bunch of brutes on this ship. They're whalers, and I'd be scared too. But anyway, he develops physically. He develops his courage develops. And it's very inspiring, and I agree with you. It's inspiring to see somebody get better, get stronger in different ways in the face of adversity and danger. So it's very inspiring. I think the story Hank Rearden in Atlas Shrugged is very inspiring to see the way he learns, and he's able to throw off, all the moochers on him, both his family and the government. He throws off and realizes fully that he's got a right to his own life, to live his own life, and what a virtue it is to be an enormous producer like he is, and have the pride in his productivity and his moral virtue. It's enormously inspiring. But at the same time, the perfect guys, the Howard Rocks, the John Galts, the Dagny Taggarts, the Fransisco Danconis, they're an exemplar. I mean, I regard it, I mean, there's different, people have different responses to a work of art and characters in a work of art. But for me, as an inveterate hero worshiper, when I first encountered Rock and Dagny, and Fransisco and Galt, I felt inspired that this is the human potential. So they're up here morally. I'm not going to be a genius like Ayn Rand's heroes are, but that's not the point. We're talking about moral development fundamentally, right? As heroism is fundamentally a moral concept. The dedication to life-promoting values and the willingness to stand up for them, no matter the impediments, and or the dangers. To have that kind of integrity and that moral courage. So, to me, they're an inspiration. So I'm not there. I mean, in fact, 50 years later, I'm still not there. But I've used them as an exemplar that I can become better. That this is the human potential. That what Ayn Rand's showing us here is the human potential. I'm not there yet, but why can't I get there? Why can't I emulate them and try and improve myself and get closer and closer and closer to these perfect heroes? To me, it's enormously inspiring, and I given millions and millions of Ayn Rand's readers who admire her characters, I hardly think I'm alone. All kinds of heroes that can inspire us.
Right. So another question I have about heroes. So at some point, I think Ayn Rand is asked, why does Howard Roark never have a cold, or Dagny never have like a. And she said that that's not the point, right? It's what you say, it's the stylistic thing. Right. But nowadays we see more and more, not so much the anti-heroes. I mean, we can discuss later about the anti-heroes.
I got a lot to say about them.
Or even about, for example, someone like Joker, which is, by the way, it's like a cultural phenomenon. But what about the heroes with self-doubt? So, for example, in the last 10, 15 years, we see a switch in heroes movies. So we see, for example, Batman doubting himself, or Superman thinking about retirement, thinking, "Wait, am I like the good? Am I still the good guy?" So there are two ways to see this, and I can't decide which of the two is like better. The one is to say, look, that's realistic, right? Gold has also doubt, like when he's outside of that restaurant and he sees Rearden, and he knows that this guy is, okay, major spoiler, if you haven't read, do this now. And he says, this is the guy who is with the woman I love. And for a second he says, I'm so jealous of you. And then he comes back to reality. So there is this, and people call it humane thing, which is, I don't know if it's a good way to describe, but this, let's say, momentary weakness. So how do you judge this new, let's say, saga of Batmans and all these people who are constantly in this element of self-doubt, and also when it's not clear where they fall on the hero or the villain side? So an example is the Dark Knight, where actually the Batman decides to take the blame, but even before he takes the blame, there are many people in, let's say, the Gotham universe who said, well, is it really okay to be this vigilante, and who is to say who is right and who is wrong and all that stuff? So I'd appreciate your comment on that.
Sure. So I have no problem with heroes with self-doubts. I know a lot of objectivists who don't like it, possibly Ayn Rand herself, judged by some of the things that she wrote, didn't like it. But me personally, I have no problem with it. And I'll go back to you mentioned all these DC heroes. And from the time I was a kid, I vastly preferred Marvel, and still do. So I'm gonna keep growing up. I'm in Spider-Man, right? And Peter Parker, is puny Parker. He's picked on by Flash Thompson. He's shy with the ladies. He's got all these self-doubts. But it doesn't prevent him from all this daring do that he accomplishes, taking down bad guys and saving the innocent, and and everything. And so there's a way in which I could understand this approach to heroism, and that is you're showing the hero overcoming not just external obstacles to do all these great deeds, but even his own inner doubts. He's rising to the occasion despite having doubts about himself. And so I have no problem with it. If we have these anti-hero kind of mentalities who are so plagued with self-doubts or riddled with ennui and life is meaningless to them, and they can't get up off their sofa, in their living room to do anything in life, I feel for them. I feel bad for them. I kind of pity them. But there's nothing heroic about that. But somebody who has these kind of plagued with these inner torments, where they were raised in a dysfunctional family, or they live in an irrational society, or have their own, adolescent angst, as in Peter Parker's case, Spider-Man's case, but they rise to the occasion. They don't have to be superheroes. They rise. They could be just an everyday person who rises to the occasion, who has certain goals, whether he wants to finish college or go to medical school, or he or she start their own business, or raise a family of healthy children, or find romantic love that's a real meaningful relationship, and there's these obstacles in their path, and they doubt themselves, but they rise to the occasion and they do it. I'm gonna applaud that. That's 2 thumbs up. I mean, that I think is certainly heroic, and it's inspirational. And I think heroes come in all shapes and sizes, including those who are plagued with self-doubt. But that the heroic thing is they have to rise to the occasion and overcome it. They can't let themselves be overwhelmed by these neuroses, or these inner psychological problems. They have to rise to the occasion in pursuit of life supporting goals, or face up to the dangers and or the obstacles confronting them, and they have to face up to them. It's possible that they lose the battle, like Cyrano, who's a tremendous hero, but none of his goals are ever accomplished. But they have to face up to it in action. They have to muster the courage to face up to it, take that heroic, and in that sense, they achieve the status of hero. Having a moral sense that when they do that, Cyrano triumphs in a moral sense, even if not in a practical sense. They triumph in a moral sense by screwing their courage to the sticking point, as Lady Macbeth says, and let's go to battle.
I have one more question about anti-heroes, but there's already a question in the chat. So, Raz, shall we go first to the chat?
Let's go to Joseph, and then we'll come back to you, and then me. I have a question as well. Joseph.
So my question is about, there's a series of heroes like Dagny Taggart, Hank Rearden, John Galt. All of Rand's heroes, as far as I can remember, they have a purpose. And my question is, what is the role of purpose in the construction of a hero, construction, so to speak?
Yeah, I think that's vital. The hero, that you can't generate the conflict that makes for a suspenseful plot without a purposeful main character. The main character has a goal. There's something that he wants to do. He wants to design buildings and achieve commercial success on his own terms, let's say, or he wants to stop the motor of the world, and bring an end to these statist regimes that suppress freedom of the mind and reestablish freedom of the mind, let's say. Or in the case of the Sea Wolf, Humphrey Van Weyden wants to survive on board this hell ship with these brutal guys, and he needs to develop certain skills and courage in order to do so. But there's got to be a goal, otherwise it says boring. But who cares? And that's a lot of these modernist stories that they just ramble. They're just a series of vignettes or scenes, and there's no main character with a central purpose. So the goal, the purpose, the value that the main character pursues, that in a well-plotted novel, raises antagonism. There's certain forces or persons that stand in his or her way, and then you get this clash, this clash of antagonists, and there's the suspense in the story. The reader wants to, how's it going to turn out? Is the hero going to be able to triumph over these antagonists or not? And a certain way, writing a story is not that hard. You figure, one, you get a main character that's got a central purpose or goal. Two, something or somebody stands in his way. Three, they struggle. And then four, it reaches a climax, that where the struggle is resolved one way or the other. There's your story. Of course, you got to fill in all the particulars, but yeah, you need a purposeful main character in order to generate a good story.
And if you look at real world heroes, do you see the same pattern there?
Yeah, they're always in some kind of opposition, at the very least. So you take people like great scientists or inventors, Thomas Edison, Louis Pasteur, I mentioned before. At the very least, they're dealing with the intractable problems of trying to uncover nature's secrets. Trying to identify what causes all of these diseases, what will actually work to generate an incandescent electric light. They spent years, doing the research on recondite problems. Furthermore, so you're dealing with nature here, and the struggle, the enormous effort it takes to unlock nature's secrets. Then inevitably, when you're an innovator of that kind, inevitably raises social opposition, like Howard Roark found that, because you got no ideas. And the people, so the French medical establishment welcomed Pasteur's germ theory. No, they said he was crazy. It goes against everything that they've been steeped in, immersed in their whole educational and life and careers. You think these tiny little microscopic organisms, which we can't even see, they're strong enough to kill an elephant? You must be a madman. They wanted to institutionalize it. And I think Howard Roark's courtroom speech, he says to all he dedicates it to all the innovators in the past who came up with new ideas and who, because they were new, went against the entrenched beliefs of the leading thinkers in that society, and were persecuted for it. So it almost always, just by virtue of being a revolutionary, you feel almost by the very nature of it, you're going to call up social opposition to the new ideas. So you're going to deal with, you have to fight nature in a certain way, and then you're going to have the real battle, the harder battle even is against society.
Good one, thank you.
Yeah, sure. I love this stuff. So this is fun.
Nikos, did you want to ask another question now?
Yeah, I want to ask something about anti-heroism, but to ask this question, I first need to ask Andy if he has watched Fight Club.
Oh, it's the Brad Pitt film, right?
Yes.
No, I never saw it. It sounded dark to me, so I like Brad Pitt as a leading man, but no, I never saw that movie. But I know the basics of the story.
So okay, it's not 100% about that film. So until some years ago in Wikipedia, Tyler Durden, who is Brad Pitt in the film, is an example of anti-hero, and he's nihilistic. He has no good purpose. He has a very bad philosophy, but it's impossible not to like him. I mean, it's maybe I'm shallow and cheap, but it's impossible not to like him. And the same happens with other villains. So I never liked the Heath Ledger Joker. So, but Gordon Gekko, is another who is, I'm not convinced if he's, a bad person. Anyway, that's neither here nor there, but he's meant to be disliked. But again, he's cool. And there are some aspects of his character that is impossible not to like. So how do we deal with this situation where you have someone who is not a hero, sometimes maybe not an anti-hero with your definition, because I know in your book you give different definition of the anti-hero, but how do we deal with these personalities that they're not good, but at the same time they have something very cool and appealing? So how do we deal with people like Tyler Durden, who is very cool, or Gordon Gekko? I know some people in the chat think he's not necessarily a villain, but people who are not meant to be heroes, but they have this style or this appealing personality that we end up treating as heroes, although they're significantly flawed. I mean, Tyler Durden is ridiculously flawed.
Yeah, that's the Brad Pitt character in Fight Club. Well, there's this concept that they use in fiction and in real life. It's called rogue, R-O-G-U-E. It could be a charming bad guy, but he's got a enormously personable, going back to classic British literature. I mean, Robert Louis Stevenson's Treasure Island is a good example. Long John Silver. I mean, he's a killer, but he's so charming. You can't not like him. And he's completely untrustworthy. But he's just got such charisma. So I think we need to do a dual. It's like a dual file system we use here. That we recognize morally this guy is not trustworthy. In fact, he might even be a murderer. So he's somebody you have to be constantly vigilant against. But at a personality level, at an emotional level, I like him. I find him charming. I find him personable. But I recognize morally, in my rational brain, as an old girlfriend of mine used to put it, this is an unscrupulous, unsavory, untrustworthy, and perhaps murderous character. So I think we do that dual filing. We recognize morally this is not a hero. I mean, I like him. I find him charming, and he's got great charisma. But this is not a hero. Might even be a villain. Usually these kind of characters are not anti-heroes. Anti-heroes are just kind of hapless. They're overwhelmed by a dysfunctional family, or they're crushed under the booted heel of the capitalist system. Or they're just riddled with ennui, and they can't get out of their house. And so they're usually just kind of feckless. They're, in Yiddish terms, they're nebbishes. They're just kind of sad sacks. They're just kind of pathetic.
So would you say then that Joker, in the last Joker, is an archetypical anti-hero?
Well, he becomes a villain. I mean, he's a murderous villain by the end of the story. But at the beginning of the story, he's bullied. You feel for him. He's Arthur Fleck. Is that his name? I think. Yeah. I can't believe I made it through that movie. Oh God. I mean, it's just degenerate. It's an interesting point, Nikos, because he devolves from an anti-hero to a villain, to a full-fledged murderous, dangerous, brute. And but yeah, the early Arthur Fleck in that story, he's just pathetic. You don't hate him. He's picked on. He's pushed around. He's bullied. You can see why he's angry. Yeah, he's an anti-hero that transforms into a legitimate villain. In that way, it's an interesting story, although it's so brutal by the end of the movie, I can't recommend it.
Yeah, so Andy, while you were rebooting your computer, I was just asking the guys if you could recommend any fiction or movies or TV shows, past or present, with, not by Ayn Rand, with Randian-style heroes.
Randian-style heroes?
Yeah.
I don't know about Randian-style heroes, because her heroes are distinctively intellectual ones and moral paragons. I can think of a lot with heroes, not much with Ayn Rand-style heroes. One, I think that may fit the description of what you're looking for is the great play Inherit the Wind by Jerome, was it Jerome Washington and Robert E. Lee, I think. But Inherit the Wind, it's a fictionalized account of the Scopes monkey trial. And so, it's a battle of ideas. It's a battle of evolution versus fundamentalism. And the main character, the lawyer, Henry Drummond, who's based on the real life lawyer, Clarence Darrow, is standing up for freedom of the mind. He's something of a skeptic, not just about religion, but in general. Nevertheless, he's standing up for freedom of the mind. And there is that Ayn Rand element in Inherit the Wind that I think you would enjoy. It's a battle of ideas, where the protagonist, the antagonist wants to suppress freedom of thought in favor of dogmatic religion, and the hero stands up for freedom of the mind. So I think Inherit the Wind might fit the bill in that regard. There's probably others that have, intellectual heroes standing up for freedom of the mind that I'm just not thinking of. But you want movies or novels or even TV shows just with heroes more broadly. I mean, one of my all-time favorite novels that I've discussed many times is Jack Schaefer's novel Shane. He's not an intellectual hero. He's nothing like an Ayn Rand hero. He's a gunfighter. But he and whatever his past has been, it might have been bloody and morally tarnished. But in the real time action of the story, he's a moral paragon, standing up, risking his life to stand up against the bad guys for the best, the most productive people in the valley. So I mean, Shane, that is a legitimate hero, is one of the examples I used, at the beginning of my book on heroes to illustrate the theme. So I think there's a lot of heroes who are not like Ayn Rand heroes, but who are not intellectual heroes the way Ayn Rand depicts. But there's a lot of them. Movies. I mean, all those old Hollywood westerns, with John Wayne or Gary Cooper. They're all very heroic. There's the frontier. The sheriff on the frontier who stands for justice, whether he's got to fight bad guys, outlaws or Indians, Native Americans in the politically correct parlance of the day. There's, and all those old Hollywood. Look, I could criticize Hollywood egregiously, but they also done a lot of good movies. A lot of those old World War II movies are real patriotic, showing you usually focus on the U.S. military, but still there's good guys standing up either against the brutal military dictatorship of Japan or the Nazis. Oh, by the way, what was that one? You guys know the old school actor Jimmy Stewart? He was a big star, before my time, but a big star. 1930s, 1940s, 1950s, and in real life, he was U.S. Air Force bombardier. I think he flew combat missions over Germany. In the round-the-clock bombing of Germany, and the British bombed at night, and the Americans by day. And the Americans were bombing by day. They took horrible losses in the sky over Germany. I think Jimmy Stewart was actually, a bomber, bombardier, or on a pilot or crew member of some of those B-17 bombing Germany by day during World War II. But he made a movie. I can't remember what was the name of the name of it. Will come to me. But it takes place in Germany, in the 1930s as Hitler's consolidating power. And there's some professor, who's a Jew, and he's showing that human blood is human blood, that moral characteristics are not in the blood as the Nazis have it, and non-Aryan blood is no different than Aryan blood, and you see the Nazis come to power, and he's persecuted, and I don't remember the name of the movie offhand, but
is it The Mortal Storm?
Yeah, that's it. Mortal Storm with James Stewart, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, very, very good. It's not just anti-Nazi. It's anti-Nazi based on moral philosophic principles, that their philosophy, that morality is biologically transmitted, that morality is genetic, that it's in the blood. The main characters stand up against that, irrational belief. Real science versus the pseudoscience that's pushed by politics in this case. So yeah, Mortal Storm with James Stewart, I think is very good.
Before we go to the next question, Ian, do you have a follow-up or do you have a recommendation for us?
One thing that I enjoyed, I wouldn't go out and say completely a Randian. I mean, he's definitely got his flaws, but the character Harvey Specter in the early seasons of Suits, I quite enjoyed. He's someone who's unapologetically skillful. He doesn't go in for this kind of shucks, it was nothing to do with me kind of false modesty. He's very exceptionally good at what he does. He's exceptionally talented. He's got a strong moral compass. In the early seasons of Suits, as I said to you, I think all American TV shows get stupid after a while because they run out of story and they're just trying to keep it going because they've got a hit show on their hands when they finish the story, like after season one. But in the early shows of Suits, I quite enjoyed.
Not familiar with it, but sounds good.
Next question is from Kathy.
Hi there. This is a real life person, but has anybody read Tara Westover's book called Educated?
No. What's it about?
An amazing true story of a woman who grew up with 2 parents and 6 siblings in Idaho in a crazy fundamentalist house where most of the kids had never even gone to school. They were completely off the grid. And there's violence there. There's all kinds of stuff going on that you can't believe, including, refusal to go to doctors when horrendous injuries, etc. And she gets herself into college and she ends up with a PhD from Cambridge.
Wow.
It's a great book. And then
the name of it is Educated?
It's called Educated, right. And she writes beautifully. Although he's not a good person, but if anybody's been watching Tigerland, the Tiger King on Netflix.
Was that Joe Exotic, right?
Joe Exotic. I mean, the guy does everything his way. He's nobody to admire particularly, but I mean, you got to hand it to the guy. He's a real character and he bucks authority every which way.
Yeah, I think I haven't seen any of that, but I've read about it. And he sounds like a good example of what Nikos was talking about before. Morally, he's
morally
dishonest. He does all kinds of immoral things that we have to condemn him for. So he doesn't even approximate the status of hero. But he might be a very charming, colorful, rapscallion kind of character that we regard as fun and charming. Might even like him personally, right. Even though we have to remember in our rational brain, this guy can't be trusted. That he may even border on the villainous or even trespass the border. But he might be a very charming rascal or rogue, in that regard.
So Kathy, do you have a follow-up?
No, that's okay.
All right.
I'm trying to think of some fictional people, but they're not coming to mind at the moment.
By the way, if we talk about heroic films, Whiplash is definitely there on my list.
Oh, Whiplash, yeah, I like Whiplash a lot.
Yeah, and although it has a lot of mystical stuff, Interstellar for me was a heroic film because of the theme that, we shouldn't be left here in the earth and we can do other stuff. And I think all of Nolan's films has this grandiose vision, and that's why I said I would like to see him direct.
Interstellar, that was Matthew McConaughey, right?
Yes.
Yeah, I like that. I like that movie. It had a quasi-environmentalist point to it. The Earth was becoming unlivable. They didn't make explicit that human beings had caused it. They left open to the possibility that it was a natural catastrophe, which was good. But yeah, you're right. And we're going to the stars. The human race is going to survive. There's definitely a heroic element to it, and the Matthew McConaughey character and his daughter, both of them were very heroic characters. I think there's a lot. It's an encouraging sign in our culture that there's been a lot of hero movies, over the last 10 years, and some of them are even serious. They're not all superhero, costume crime fighter kind of movies. For instance, the most recent movie about Steve Jobs, which I think was just named Steve Jobs, right? With what's his name, who plays Magneto in the X-Men. I forget the actor's name off the top of my head. It'll come to me. But they show it's based on the Walt Isaacson biography of Steve Jobs, which is very good. It shows all of his warts, all of his bad qualities. It shows that he denies paternity of his daughter for all of these years, and it shows how he's verbally abusive, to his employees and everything. But it also shows. So I know it's like maybe slightly less than 50% of the film is devoted to showing all the bad qualities of Steve Jobs, but maybe slightly more than 50% is devoted to what a visionary he was, what a brilliant entrepreneur he was, how Howard Rockian he was, that he had a vision of what a computer should be, and he wasn't going to compromise it. And he said, and he compares computers to a work of art. He said Michelangelo doesn't go out into the street and ask somebody how he should sculpt, the David, and Leonardo's not going to ask people how we're going to paint, the Mona Lisa. We know. The customers don't know. We know what it is. We design it with integrity. It's principled in accordance with our standards, and then we educate the public, and then the public will realize, how great it was. And in the long run, of course, he succeeded as a principled, visionary entrepreneur, and that part of the movie is just sterling. It's just absolutely great. And there's been a lot. That Spielberg film, Bridge of Spies, with Tom Hanks, was also very principled, very heroic, very serious. Cold War hero. There's been a number of them in recent years. It's an encouraging sign.
Okay, I have an Atlas Shrugged question, but I will leave this as the last question because some people haven't read it and might not find a lot of value in it. So I'll ask another more general question. So a difficult I have in this crisis and in this difficult period is that when it comes to any kind of, let's say, moral battle or more, even a war, you can say, look, I'm going to take my weapon, I'm going to be brave, or if it's like a physical altercation, I'm going to be, tough, or if I'm rogue, I'm going to face my enemies with integrity. But what do you do in a situation like the current one when it's not so, it's less an issue of, strength of character, and it's more of an issue of, your general health, luck, and it's out of your control what's going to happen. So yeah, I can listen, for example, to how Kira in We the Living deals with difficulties, but isn't this a different situation? Because it's not so much up to us to solve it, if that makes sense. And it's not even up to us whether we're gonna go defeat the virus on a personal level.
What's the question?
The question is, do these attributes of the hero also apply to a situation like the following one, when we're not in an actual war where we have to be brave or skillful in battle, like in, Achilles in Troy or whatever, and it's not up to our moral strength of character to, quote, defeat the virus, like Rourke in The Fountainhead, but it's an issue of that we've kind of delegated to the scientists, and for the rest of us, all it's asked is just stay inside. Or if you go outside, hope that you get it and, you don't end up in a respirator or something. Does it make sense, the question?
Yeah, okay, I get it. I think there could be tremendous heroism involved in this, but for some of us, it's not so onerous because, all of my classes have just been shifted online, so I haven't lost, my source of income. But many people have lost, their livelihood. Their business may be shut down, or they've been unemployed. Their employer had to let them go, and a lot of people, live paycheck to paycheck. They might deplete their savings, quickly. This could take, heroic measures. How are we going to survive this? This could go on for months. I may have to surreptitiously go to work, defying the government order, not irrationally, but taking all the precautions I can, wearing a mask, wearing plastic gloves, washing my hands constantly, taking 3 showers a day or whatever. But they may, or for other people, they may not have lost their source of livelihood, but there's no place for them to go even if they want to go out. You can't sit down in a restaurant, you can't go to a movie, so you have to try and keep your sanity. You have to try and do something. So for me, I just focus more on my writing, to keep myself sane. I miss the kind of entertainment that I would normally get on a daily basis, but I'm able to keep myself sane, in that way. But for people who've lost their source of livelihood, this may take heroic measures, and or they may have to go out and brave the virus in order to feed their family. So I mean that takes real courage in support of life advancing values. And I think we should all support freedom of the mind, intellectually in any way we can, because that's the way, medical research will resolve this. We need to intellectually support freedom of the mind, and get, convince people to read Atlas Shrugged, because the government's heavy hand here is not gonna enhance our ability to cure the disease or develop a vaccine to inoculate people against it. That's going to come from private initiative and entrepreneurship. So we need to stand up for that, now and in the future. Once this thing goes away, we need to stand up for it, still, because there'll be future viruses, as like SARS and like swine flu and this one, and there'll be the Spanish flu 100 years ago. There'll be others.
My question is very similar to Nikos's, or quite similar. But so in Ayn Rand's novels, the heroes, the adversity the heroes face always comes from other people, from decisions that people have made. It's always, they're always fighting a villain in one way or another. Whereas here, not to write off the man-made disasters that have followed the virus itself, but we are facing something that is not man-made. It's the metaphysically given, as Rand would put it.
It might be man-made given what they do in China. So but I get your point. It's a virus. Yeah.
So, are there significant differences in how a person would go about confronting, a metaphysically given hurdle that they face in life, or a struggle, as opposed to a man-made one?
Yeah, I mean, you talk about real life or in fiction or both. You talk about real life?
Yeah, real life.
The most egregious metaphysically given, bad news fact of reality is the inevitability of death. And, we're all going to die at some point, even if the scientists make advances, in life extension and things like that. Nobody's going to live forever. And it's very possible, that if you live for hundreds of years, you may not want to live forever, at some point. But living things die. And that includes us, and certainly now in the early 21st century, where the life expectancy maybe is if you're lucky, maybe in the 80s. So we all have to, rational human beings have to confront that. And I always tell my students, because they're young and indestructible, right? They're 20 years old, they're never going to die. I can remember what it was like to be 20. And so I tell them, look, you're going to die. What I heard as a kid from the old timers in my day was, where did the years go? Well, now I know it's true. They go like this. So in the movie Las Vegas, with Michael Douglas and Morgan Freeman and Robert De Niro and Kevin Kline, they're these 4 friends who grew up together in Brooklyn, and now they're like 70 years old. And the Michael Douglas character is celebrating his 70th birthday, 70. And he said, I can't make sense of this. He says, like 15 minutes ago, I was 17, 17, and it may not seem like 15 minutes, but it goes quickly. I tell the kids, look, you don't want to, the confronting death doesn't mean you need to be an existentialist, and oh, woe is me, we're all going to die. What does it all mean? It has no meaning because it's all going to end, badly. No, the rational response to death is to live life with a sense of urgency. You have time, but you have no time to waste. And so you need to identify what you want out of life, what your values are, and then work very hard and honestly to achieve those values so that on your deathbed, it's going to be a sad day, but you can look back on your life and think, I accomplished the things I wanted to accomplish. How much more heartbreaking is it to be dying when you realize, God, I was in love with Mary and I wanted to propose to her, but I was too afraid, or my family didn't like her, and I let the opportunity get away and I lost the love of my life, and now it's too late. I mean, that's really heartbreaking. So I think in confronting the one, intractable metaphysical obstacle of all of us, death, I think we need to live with a sense of urgency, fill our life with values, and make sure that we accomplish our values before the day we die. And I think that applies to everybody, either gender, any race, nationality, tribe, religion. That's the human condition.
So Kathy asks, speaking of a hero, what about the Chinese doctor who tried to warn everyone about the impending pandemic and paid the ultimate price?
Yeah, the regime incarcerated him, right? Did he die of the virus, or did the regime execute him? Does anybody know?
Officially, he died from the virus.
That's officially. That's the regime's report.
Yeah, we can never know. I mean, there have been doctors, because apparently, from what we know, the load of the virus could play a role. I mean, it's not impossible that one of the first doctors would get a load of the virus. But yeah, who knows?
Either way, the guy's a tremendous hero. I mean, he not only risked his life and ultimately lost his life being an outstanding medical man trying to save human life, fulfilling his purpose of his chosen career, as a medical man, standing up for human life to try and save human life, recognizing the sacredness of human life, no matter what the risks, and then speaking out about it. He had to know what the regime's response was going to be. The communist regime does not care about human life, doesn't care about native-born Chinese life. Never mind lives overseas. What they care about, of course, is prestige, wealth, and power. And they can't have it. It seemed like, there's this terrible virus raging in the country. So he had to know that he's at least willing to roll the dice in telling the truth here and warning people about how dangerous this virus is, that he was going to be arrested, incarcerated, and possibly executed, by the regime. So this is a towering hero. He standing up against the forces of nature and the forces of man, to be a real medical man, to stand up in support of human life. I mean, we need to find out what his name is, and honor him.
I have two final questions. The one is to stay in kind of depressive mode. Peter Keating, there's this scene in The Fountainhead, which I always thought, that's a bit sad. So towards the end, Keating has realized that his life is not going anywhere and that he's doing things that are not well. And he tries to go back to drawing. And he goes to Rourke and says, what do you think about this? And Rourke says, it's too late, Peter. And the question is it really too late? I mean, I can see that if you don't know how to value, if throughout your life you never had a judgment and you always relied on someone else to value, that it's more difficult. But why is it too late? I mean, we assume Keating is 30-something. There have been cases of late bloomers. So could Keating be the hero of the next novel, let's say imaginary, like a follow-up in Fountainhead? Could we see him in his 50s having gone from this being like the ultimate second-hander to being something, not a hero maybe, but a decent artist?
Yeah, that's a fascinating question. That's a question that I would have wanted to ask Ayn Rand if I had known her. I mean, I met her very briefly on 2 occasions, but I didn't know her. But to me, come back to the Keating example. But even the more salient example is Gail Wyman, because he's somebody who actually he's a tragic hero. I mean, he's in part is a hero. He accomplished enormous things. He rose up out of the gutters of Hell's Kitchen, by his own initiative and his own ability to establish this empire, both in journalism and in real estate. And yet, when he betrays Rourke and then shuts down the Banner later, he's crushed. He won't meet Rourke anymore. In the film version, he commits suicide. In Ayn Rand's novel, you get the impression maybe he will, maybe he won't. But even if he physically lives, his moral psychological life is over. Gail Wyman, the creator, is done. And so I want to ask, are there limits to free will? I mean, I think that's really the issue here. In the objectivist metaphysics, to be is to be finite. Everything is bounded, it's circumscribed. So I'd want to ask, so that includes free will, I assume, because Peter Keating, can't make that choice to regain whatever talent he had when he was a kid. And you're saying Gail Wyman can't recover from this, morally, psychologically, and go on and be better now. Have a newspaper that's run by him, not by his viewers, not by his audience, his readers. So I think Ayn Rand, I don't know. See, I don't know. I don't know if she would say that in real life these guys would be devastated like that, or she may be stylized. Maybe she would. Free will has limits, right? I mean, could Hitler redeem himself? At some point you cross a boundary, from which there's no return. And I'm not sure where that point is. But I think to be is to be finite. And I think that includes free will. But the thing about Keating, it's a heartbreaking scene. It's beautifully done. It's so touching. And remember Keating tells Rourke, he says, I haven't shown these to Ellsworth Toohey. I haven't shown these to anybody. He said, you're the one whose judgment I respect the most, and I know you'll be honest. And Rourke takes more time than he needs, as Ayn Rand described. He's looking for something, for some shred of hope that's reality based, that he could tell Keating, and he can't find it. He's like the crude drawings of a child. And if this is meant to be literally the case and not just stylizing the dangers of second-handedness and of giving up your judgment, and I'm not sure if it is or it isn't, but if it's literally the case that I think Ayn Rand is showing us, it's hard enough to be a creator if you dedicate your whole life to it from childhood. It's difficult enough to develop into a very talented painter. But if you spend 30 years, betraying your values, betraying your judgment, following whatever your mother says, or then following whatever your professors say, and following whatever Ellsworth Toohey says, and following whatever Guy Franken says, and following whatever your clients say, there's that creative spark in you. Things that are metaphorically alive can metaphorically die, I think. And that creative spark in Keating, and we don't know how much he had. He might have had, maybe he didn't. But I think Ayn Rand is showing us that the creative spark can be killed off. It's part of your own judgment. It's part of your own independence. It's you. You have to keep it alive. It's like you live in a totalitarian state, and Ayn Rand did, right, until she was 21. So you have to go along with what the secret police said, and you have to go along silently. But you don't have to go along internally, do you? Internally, you keep that spark alive. You keep your own mind alive. You keep your thinking, your judgment, your values alive. And I don't think Keating did that. And he didn't just go along with what others said. He gave up his soul to them, not just his body to follow in action. He gave up his soul to others, and that's the creative spirit, and he killed it.
I had another point on Keating. This question about why Rourke says that it's too late was asked of Greg Salmieri. I think it was in Ocon 2017. So my answer, or this is what I remember from his answer, so go look up his actual answer. but it was something along the lines of, who you are is the totality of the choices you've made throughout life and the actions you've taken. And Keating wasn't just, a 40-year-old lifelong second-hander. Like, he wasn't your run-of-the-mill second-hander. Or among the many bad things that he did throughout his life, there was also kind of killing somebody and selling his wife. So he did some pretty bad things that are a part of the totality of who he was. And according to Greg Salmieri's explanation, as I remember it, that was basically why, he had already committed to certain sort of style or a certain kind of person he wanted to be, and that this didn't fit.
Yeah, I think Ayn Rand's shown us that there is a point of no return, and I don't know where. I remember Leonard Peikoff talking about this once in a Q&A, because he was writing the ominous parallels and all the Nazis, on his mind, and he used the example of Hitler. That where's the point of no return? Is the first murder, the first million murders? At some point, you committed to this monstrous evil, and you have to just evade the moral reality of it. And if you ever let yourself see the truth of it, there's only two possibilities. Leonard said, you either go mad or you commit suicide. Like happens to James Taggart at the end of Atlas. And in the event with Hitler, he did both. There's a point of no return somewhere.
So speaking about people who've done bad things, so Winant has done horrible things, and I think the worst thing is when he blackmails productive people and tell them, either you become like whatever I tell you, or I'm going to destroy your life. He actually even says this to Rourke, and I've never understood. So basically, Winant says to Rourke at some point, when they're already friends, look, I thought about it, I'm going to destroy you as well. And Rourke laughs and gives him a paper and goes, this is the kind of buildings you want. And then Winant somehow changes his mind, although I never really understood that scene. So a comment on that scene would be, I'd appreciate it. But also the second part of the question is, why does Rourke keep sanctioning him? I mean, he sees something in him, but I never understood why Rourke rushes to become friends with Winant. I'm not convinced that in the universe of the America of the 30s or whenever this is taking place, Winant is the only possible equal to Rourke. So I never understood why this sanctioning. I mean, I realize he's a fascinating personality, but why does Rourke sanctioning, even when he sees that he could just like that also destroy him, and he hasn't taken this out of his mind?
Yeah, Winant's a fascinating character. Absolutely. I do think, here's another essay for me to write. I do think that Winant is the greatest tragic hero in literature. At the very least, up there with Macbeth and Hamlet and Oedipus and Antigone. In fact, I think exceeds that. The amazing thing about it is Ayn Rand wrote maybe the greatest tragic figure in the history of literature as a secondary character in a story about somebody else. I mean, try that sometime. That is just a awe-inspiring literary achievement. One of the reasons why I think she's the greatest novelist in world literature. But yeah, with Rourke, Winant has a personal stake in this. It's despicable what he's done to these other, Rourkean kind of figures, these independent thinkers who he made conform, under threat of being financially ruined. Or maybe say he didn't make them. He would financially ruin them, but the person that made the choice to kiss up to Winant rather than face financial ruin. But it's despicable nevertheless. But now Rourke wouldn't make that choice. I think Winant knows that. You could financially ruin me and prevent me from getting any big time clients. I'm still not going to kiss up, in the way you want. So Winant's attempts with Rourke would be futile, and I think he knows that. But beyond that, he's got a stake in this. He's his building. He wants Rourkean building. He wants Rourke to build his private home as a fortress to protect Dominique from the world, by the way, which is a brilliant plot twist, because he's hiring the only man in the world he needs to be protected from to do the protecting. So, it's a brilliant plot twist on Ayn Rand's part. But he also wants Rourke to build the Wyman building. So, I mean, he's got a personal stake with Rourke that he didn't have with these other independent persons. So, I mean, I think those are the two main reasons why he fails in this case. And even if he didn't have a personal stake, he failed because Rourke would just face financial ruin, go back to the granite quarry sooner than design buildings, the way Guy Franklin would, as Wyman would want. What Rourke sees in Wyman, I think, is, he recognizes all the despicable things Wyman does, without a doubt. He's not evading here, but it's the same thing Dominique recognizes. I mean, she marries him originally as the worst creep in the world to try and kill off her hero worship, so to anesthetize herself to the pain, of Rourke's eventual destruction. She says, when he proposes to her, she says to become Mrs. Wyman Papers. And he says, yeah, if you want. But in the end, she recognized, no, he's much more than this. He is a creative giant. He's a giant. I mean, he came up out of Hell's Kitchen, out of nothing to build this empire. And he's done a lot of despicable things, but he's got all this creative energy. Even in the bedroom, she can't not respond to him. Unlike with Keating, it's like, I'm so in love with Rourke, but I'm in love with Rourke. It's the creative force in Rourke that I'm in love with, and Wyman has it too. And I can't not, she finds herself unable to not respond. I think that's the key to understanding Wyman. He's a giant in that regard. And that's what Rourke. Rourke's is really close to a number of people, Mallory and Stephen Mallory and Kent Lansing and Roger Enright and Mike Donegan, and he's got a number of Austin Heller and Henry Cameron when he was alive, and of course Dominique Franklin. He's close to a number of people. He's got way more close friends than most people do. Most people, good people may have one or two close friends. Rourke's got close to a dozen. But Wyman's special. He's just got a creative genius and a creative force and a creative power that nobody else has, and Rourke recognizes that, and he tries to save him because Rourke recognizes, this is what's so interesting about the demise of Wyman, that remember he tells during the strike, Wyman's losing money because nobody's buying the paper, and Rourke says to him, "Don't give in." He said, "Don't give in, even if it costs you everything you own. Don't give in." You see what Rourke's telling him. Wyman sold his soul for the secondhand tabloid, and therefore necessarily the price of reclaiming his soul is everything that he got in exchange for. If he gives up every penny he owns and has gained from the banner, the banner can now become his. It's no longer, the readers don't want it anymore. They're not buying it anymore. The banner can now become his. It can become the kind of newspaper that the New York Times claims to be, the paper of record. It isn't. It's dishonest, rag. But what it claims to be, a paper of very high integrity, of principles, filled with Wyman's values, like, his love of Rourke, his love of Dominique, his love of these great artworks, filled with Wyman's values, not the values of his readers. The paper becomes his. Remember what Dominique says to him during the strike when he's writing these brilliant editorials, in support of Rourke and independent thinkers who stood up to society. And Dominique says it sadly. She says, "Gail, what a great journalist you could have been. Read that and should have been." That's what Rourke wants. Lose this paper and everything you own, and then the Gail Wyman that I love, the kid who rose up out of Hell's Kitchen to create an empire, you do it again. Or this time in accordance with your values, not in accordance with the values of your readers. That's what Rourke wants, and Wyman just doesn't have the inner strength to do it again. And that's the question I want to ask Ayn Rand. Is free? Could he have done it? Could he have made the choice to do it? He just didn't make the choice, or is he actually incapable of it? Because even though he's like, what is he, late 50s, 60 years old, and his whole career now of 40 years or 45 years or 50 years, it's all for nothing. He's been condemned, right? At Rourke's trial, he was condemned. Remember, he stands up. When verdict is pronounced on Rourke, a brilliant scene. Only Ayn Rand could have written this. And verdict's being pronounced on both of them. And it's an inverse proportion. If Rourke is guilty, then it shows that you can't achieve practical success in this society on your own terms, and Winans acquitted. But if Rourke is acquitted, then you can achieve success on your own terms, and Winans convicted. So he is convicted. And his whole career, and not only did he sell his soul, he sold it for nothing. He didn't have to. But I wonder, what Ayn Rand would say. I think personally he could have made that decision. Rourke certainly thinks he could have. That's why he wanted to tell him, don't give up, don't give in, don't give up. Rourke thinks he could. I think Rourke's right. I think he could have, and he just couldn't find the inner strength after 50 years of his life being wasted. All the bad things he did for nothing. He didn't gain anything from it. And I think he's just crushed. I don't think he had to be crushed. I think free will can overcome that in this case. That's my opinion. But he's crushed by it. You can understand why he's crushed. His whole career is a lot. It's great. This stuff is great. Ayn Rand just doesn't receive the recognition as a novelist. As a philosopher, she gets some of the recognition. Some. There's an Ayn Rand Society of the American Philosophical Association, for example. Whatever the professional organization for English professors is, believe me, they don't have any Ayn Rand Society. They're the literature people. They'll be the last, and I mean this with no hyperbole. They will literally be the last people on earth to recognize that Ayn Rand's the greatest novelist in world literature. They hate her and ignore her, and there's very few exceptions. And it's just heartbreaking. She's a magnificent novelist. It's just, you read this stuff, you go, wow, I knew this at 16. Why don't these college professors who are English professors, why don't they see it? Now they're evading. It has to be. It can't be honest. It's good stuff, though. It's good stuff. I love The Fountainhead. My all-time favorite book.
So Joseph mentions that Peikoff discusses Keating at some point and says that Keating betrayed all his values, and that's why it was too late.
Yeah, and I think what Ayn Rand's showing us here is that faculty with which you value. Call it your soul, or your spirit, or your judgment, or whatever it is. That faculty which enables you to value. He squashed it. He stifled it. He's suppressed it, and I think he caused it. He committed suicide in that regard, and he doesn't have the capacity to value anymore.
Okay, last question. So the hardest pill to swallow in the Randian universe, for me, is how do Fransisco, again, mega spoiler, how do Fransisco and Hank go on having lost the woman of their life? And there are other nice women. Kay Ludlow, if I remember well the name of the wife of Ragnar. And there are other exciting, but she's taken. So, but here's what confuses me. Can we agree that for Rourke, for Galt, the highest value is Dominique, because he leaves his friends and he even risks his life. Sorry, not Dominique, Dagny. So he goes back to the wall for Dagny. So we assume that he puts Dagny as the highest of his values. But at the same time, Hank and Fransisco seem to be okay with the fact that Dagny is gone forever and that they're going to see her forever with their friend Galt. So would this mean that for Hank and for Fransisco, their highest value is actually Galt and not Dagny?
The romantic triangle or quadrilateral in Atlas Shrugged is fascinating. Somebody once asked me in the Q&A, if you could be any one of Ayn Rand's characters, who would you choose? And I said I would choose to be Dagny Taggart, because she gets to sleep with Fransisco, Reardon, and Galt. She hit the trifecta, But I think Ayn Rand's showing us a number of things here. First of all, this is highly stylized. So remember, in the real world, there would be other women, like Dagny. There would be, different fields. Maybe not running a railroad, but there would be, women who write novels, like Ayn Rand, and there'd be, women who are composing music, and there'd be, women who, started software companies, and there'd be women who are medical researchers. So there would be, believe me, in the real world, Cisco Tanconia and Hank Reardon would not lack for appropriate female companionship. They're giants, so they would attract, the other female giants who in real life would exist. But you want to stylize a love story, like an Atlas Shrugged, and and show that Dagny the Dagny Taggart will choose, the greatest of the great, the giant of the giant, the man who's out there beyond the horizon, holding up the rails. It makes for it makes for a great love story. It makes for great romantic drama, and it's got to be. She's got to choose Gaul, right? Now. Also, I think there's a philosophical point, a metaphysical point. Ayn Rand believes, I think appropriately, our fundamental relationship is not with society or other people. Our fundamental relationship is with nature. It's with reality. And so this is why, for a rational human being, your career comes first. Your relationship, we have to produce values. It's metaphysically given. We had that discussion with Dr. Frawley a few weeks ago, right? It's metaphysically given. It's part of nature. It's not mandated by society. And so, your relationship with nature comes first. Your career comes first. So Reardon has his mills and his Reardon metal. He that comes first. Fransisco has his copper. His copper industry and his, and these guys are brilliant entrepreneurs. They're brilliant industrialists. Their fundamental meaning in their life comes from their work. Now, having said that, of course, Dagny was the love of their life for each of them. So this is heartbreaking. This is painful. There's no question. It's painful. A romantic, losing the love of your life is painful. It might be mitigated somewhat by realizing, well, Galt is this giant, so I can understand why Dagny chooses him, and Galt's a close friend of mine, so it might be mitigated somewhat, but it's painful. But Ayn Rand showing us, you think Fransisco d'Anconia can't recover from heartbreak? Do we think Hank Reardon can't recover from heartbreak? They can, they will. They'll love again. And not to mention the fact that it's friendship is not the same thing as romance, but this is bromance, man. Hank and Fransisco love each other. I don't mean romantic. It's not romantically, but this is a more than a friendship. This is like Rourke and Wyman. This is a soulmate relationship. That has value, and that definitely has value. So Reardon and Fransisco suffered painful loss without a doubt, but these are giants. This is for you. You're Fransisco d'Anconia, for God's sake. You're Hank Reardon, for God's sake. You recover from this, you'll love again, and when we come back to the world and we rebuild the world, freedom of the mind, we'll see the rise of female heroines, heroes who do all these great things, and Fransisco and Reardon will love again with a Dagny Taggart kind of heroine.
Yeah, thanks. I remember in a previous event you mentioned Bogart in Casablanca and this dignity with which he sees the airplane to leave, which is my favorite scene in the history of cinema. And you said that Rick is a giant. So yeah, that sucks, but I'm still Rick. So life will go on.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. That's why I would want to see Wyman recover in the way that Rourke envisions and start over again. I lost everything, but I gained. Actually, I didn't lose it. I lost all this material gain from the newspaper for which I sold my soul. But now I've recovered my soul, and now the newspaper can be mine, or I can go on and create in real estate or in another field. When you don't have to look, when you're a giant like that, the self-esteem that should properly go with that mitigates the terrible heartbreak. The terrible heartbreak is real. You got to go through a mourning process to recover. There's no doubt. But when you're a giant, you can recover from that. Mere mortals like us can recover from heartbreak. I've done it. And I'm not, Hank Reardon or Fransisco d'Anconia. I recovered from a broken heart several times. It's not fun.
The memory is always somewhere on the back of the head, no?
Yeah, but I'll tell you what, the good things about the relationship, I remember more than the heartbreak. The heartbreak, I still remember it. I can still feel it, but it was all the good things in the relationship that caused me to be in love. That's what I remember more than the pain of the breakup.
Razi, we should definitely have another event with Andy purely on romance and romance in fiction and romantic heroes and all that stuff.
Yeah, romance. That's one of the. I think Ayn Rand's right. Our relationship with nature is first and fundamental. But man, as Ayn Rand herself shows in her novels, romantic love is important. and it is it is a beautiful topic.
We did have a live event with Andy about sex and romance a couple of years ago, and we'll have more of these events. We'll actually have an event 2 days from today about the title is Romance Under Lockdown. That's our next meetup, Wednesday at 7.
It's the best thing you could do under lockdown, right?
Well, so it depends on your situation, I guess. So you know, if there are people who are for example, in a relationship but don't live together, they might be apart for months now.
Yeah, sure.
And dating has taken on a whole new I don't know, it's a different thing from what it was a month ago. So for that discussion, we have Emily Hill, who is a writer and has written a book on dating titled Bad Romance, and Zoe Strimple, who writes a column for the Sunday Telegraph and has also written 3 books, I think, on romance and dating. And we have Nikos, who is the Ayn Rand Center UK resident expert on the topic. So I hope you all join us for that on Wednesday. It is not yet up on Meetup as of right now, but it will be tonight. And before we sign off, Andy, is there any news that you want to share with us? Anywhere where people can go to find out more about you or support your work?
Yeah, thank you, Razi. Yeah, I just set up my Patreon account. So you go to patreon.com and you could find me there and support my work. Where every dollar that I make on Patreon, I vowed is going to go. My daughter starts college in the fall, so it's going to go to the college education of Penelope Joy. So pennies for penny, as I put it, dollars for penny. But it supports my work, regarding heroes, regarding education, regarding objectivism, regarding Ayn Rand's novels, regarding capitalism. So, we're egoists. So anything that you can comfortably afford without sacrifice to support my work here is greatly appreciated. So thank you, Leslie.
Yeah, and if you're watching this on YouTube, there's a link to Andy's, to Dr. Bernstein's Patreon in the description. Nikos, where can people go if they want to support the Ayn Rand Center UK?
They should go to the Ayn Rand Center UK and become a member.
Yeah, that's aynrandcenter.co.uk/membership, and there's a link to that in the description as well. There are lots of links in the description, and you should click them all.
Can I say one last thing?
Yeah.
I'm counting the lockdown with the Monday Ayn Rand Center events. So, and always I leave the event in a more cheerful mood than I entered. So I think we get a lot of value out of, Raz's work and the Ayn Rand Center. So I'd encourage people to be generous with, with their donations or with their support. Obviously both to Andy, but since, we are here, do support, because these things take Raz's time. They take they take infrastructure, and they don't happen magically.
I second that. I want to thank Razi for the great work you do in putting up this event. This was fun. I mean, the one we did the other day on humor is not my field, and I'm glad you had Rucker because it's his field. But this I love. This to me was a lot of fun.
Well, we will do more. I don't want to advertise yet anything we don't have a specific date for, but we will go back to discussing fiction and how some of what Rand wrote ties into some of what we're seeing in the world today. And I appreciate your comments. By the way, Nikos, I'm offended on behalf of Wednesdays and Saturdays that you only mentioned Mondays. But Mondays are excellent, as are Wednesdays and Saturdays. So I hope everybody joins us for all those events. And thank you for joining us today.